Welcome to the Digital Manufacturer Podcast, your frontline source for all things digital transformation in manufacturing. I'm your host, Mark Flynn, and I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of manufacturing. In each episode, we'll uncover the stories of innovation that are defining the industry, offering insights and strategies that help to drive growth and efficiency. Join us as we speak to thought leaders and visionaries who share their journeys and the lessons they've learned along the way. So let's dive into today's episode and discover what the future holds for the digital manufacturer. James, welcome to the Digital Manufacturer Podcast. How are you doing?
Absolutely brilliant, thank you, especially since I'm about to go off on holiday soon.
Good man. Well, I'm sure you, given some of the work that you've been doing, you've deserved a well-deserved break. So look, listen, thank you very much for your time. We love to kick off the podcast these days with an icebreaker question. So this is a question that we don't give our guests visibility of, that we like to ask to see exactly how you would respond. Are you ready?
I think so.
It'll be an easy one for you. So, James, what is the most innovative change that you've seen in the construction industry recently?
I think actually it's not a technical change. More, it's a change in culture and people's awareness of digital, if that makes sense. Because actually, there's been a lot of decent tools around, but the problem in the industry has always been around adoption. But what I've seen happen over the last couple of years, and primarily because of the use of these large language models that have started coming into the public consciousness, people are starting to become very aware of things like artificial intelligence. So that's changed their thinking, and rather than being naysayers now, more and more people are starting to say, right, what can we do with this? So whilst it was very difficult previously to kind of get people onto the digital transformation page, it's becoming a lot easier now, and more people are coming to me rather than me having to go to them.
That's brilliant. So I suppose there's been a giving all the marketing and I suppose the step change in digital technology from where we were prior to ChatGPT being released to where we are now. A lot of people are more interested in artificial intelligence and how technology can help them to do their day job more effective, more efficiently. That's brilliant. So James, give us a bit of background into yourself. How did you end up at Gleeds? How did you end up in data and analytics and AI? And what impact does your role have within the organization?
Cool. Well, good question. It's quite a journey, actually, because I've been with Gleeds actually a long time, most of my career. So I trained as a quantity surveyor. Really looking into the finances of construction projects and procurement, et cetera, but all the way back to when I was sort of doing my undergraduate degree, I always had an interest in digital transformation. And actually the initial plan, which I've totally failed at, it was to spend a few years in industry and then move into sort of academia. So totally failed at that, because over 20 years later, I was still doing QSing, but had a brilliant time. Worked on incredible projects all throughout the UK and in Paris and various other places, mainly in the education sector, lots of universities, so the likes of Imperial College, a lot of the Oxford colleges, but never lost the bug, and never lost the kind of interest in what was happening out there with technology. And then around 2020, I was given the opportunity to step into the role of head of what was then called Insight and Analytics. And that was mainly around research in the construction industry. So the market reports that we do and the research around the industry. So that was a kind of gate opener for me into this new world of research and analytics. And I soon became very, very aware that data analytics was going to play a big part in the future of this industry. So I actually did a qualification, a level 4 qualification as a data analyst, which was eye-opening. It was really eye-opening for me because I started seeing it's the future and what the future could hold. And that was really good timing, because around the same time as I did that, the insight and analytics department that I was part of got subsumed into a wider digital team, a digital transformation team, which was a global team. So still doing the research, really, really important, still doing the data analytics, but now starting to look at wider way that digital can help our company become more efficient, more productive, and in the end, add more value to our clients. And then that's kind of now morphed into the whole buzz around artificial intelligence. So what does that mean? And now we're kind of really spearheading the use of mainly these large language models and artificial intelligence into our processes. So it's been quite a journey. And I think the second part of your question is, how are we using it? Well, the other big thing that's changed, going back to your original question, was the affordability and the entry point. Whereas previously it was always very, very risky and cost a lot of money to do some kind of digital transformation. The entry barrier has reduced right down. So actually now you can do quite a lot by experimenting. So we do a lot of experimenting, and most of the products and the solutions that we've put out there have been the result of some kind of experimentation or some kind of hackathon or some kind of event and that's so important, so that the ability for us to do that now means that we don't have to constantly make these huge financial decisions. We can test the water and fail, the old saying, fail fast where necessary. But actually, it's been surprisingly successful.
I think that's so right. I mean, I can remember back in the day when, if you wanted a new piece of technology, not only did you have to get approval for the license, that would be a yearly or 2-year type license, but you'd also have to procure the hardware to go and install it somewhere. And cloud is and SaaS in particular, software as a subscription, has changed how businesses can innovate and test and prototype on the latest technologies. And one of the reasons we started Rubik was because for the SME sector, there's never been a greater time to start testing and adopting technology, because it's relatively risk-free. It is lower cost than it ever has been. And you can really start to use these technologies without fear of creating a massive negative impact in your business. You can prototype and test very, very easily. So I totally agree with that. James, you might just give us a quick introduction to Gleeds, just to set the context for the listener about the size of the organization that you work for and what you guys do.
Yeah, so Gleeds, we're an international property construction consultant, actually. So the way I like to say it when people say, what do you do? Well, whether you're building a building or nuclear power plant or roads, we do everything except for the design or the build. We do all the bits in between. So all the consulting, the working with clients on feasibilities, doing the costs, doing the project management, doing the advisory, God forbid, doing the dispute resolution. So all the bits, the glue that holds the whole process together. Another important part of what we do is the procurement of the consultants. That could be the architects or the engineers, and procurement of the contractors and the procurement of the FM contractors. So it's quite wide ranging. And, the kind of projects we do can be anything from a small school extension all the way through to some mega projects throughout the world. And we are, a large organization. We've got presence in most countries. And, so some of the clients we have, top-notch clients, and some of the projects we've been involved with, are truly, truly inspiring and incredible.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And what are, if you can share with us, some of the innovations you and the team are working on in the data insights and AI space? Yeah. You mentioned at the head of the call that I suppose the focus of the team is around generating efficiency and generating extra value for your clients. How are you using technology today to kind of achieve that aim?
Yeah, so I kind of divide it into two. So there's the kind of inward-facing stuff, and the outward-facing stuff is the best way to describe it. So there's the innovations and the tools that we're developing to make our staff better at their job, or better or more efficient. So that can be stuff like our benchmarking capability. So as a large corporation, we've got a lot of project data, But one of the problems in the construction industry, the project data isn't used very well. So we've been able to sort of use artificial intelligence techniques to get the data into good order so that we can then use that in terms of benchmarking and using that project data to predict cost of program. So that's an example of an internal facing thing that we can make our people faster and better what they do. And then an example of an external facing thing might be the kind of thing that we can provide as a service to clients. So the ability to create digital twins of buildings using the latest LiDAR and photogeometry services, or something that we call visualize, which is the ability to create a full capture of what's happening on site using 3D cameras. And they do obviously overlap slightly because, some of our internal tools we show to clients and they say, I want one of those. How can I get one of those? So it becomes an external facing thing. But that's the broad categorization of how we divvy things up. But the point you made around data is really important, Mark, because all of it fundamentally comes down to the quality of the data. And the construction industry has been notorious at not using its data very well. That doesn't mean it doesn't use its data, but what it means is we actually generate absolutely huge amounts of data throughout the course of a project, and only a minuscule amount of it ever makes it in some kind of database that can be reused. Now, that's something that I'm desperately trying to change, not just with Gleeds, but with a wider role that I have with the RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. I'm on their construction professional group around how we can leverage data that we all generate through these projects better, because my worry is that we're kind of sleepwalking into giving a lot of data away. So you mentioned before how great some of these software as a service are, and they are absolutely, some of them are absolutely fantastic. But the danger with some of them is also that they're sucking up a lot of project data, and all of them have got ambitions of making the industry great. Some of them have got ambitions of making their business great. And, I'll just refer you to the likes of Netflix or Spotify or Uber, and how these they're all just data companies. I know they provide some kind of product or whatever else, but they're actually just data companies. And all they're doing is hoovering up loads and loads of consumer data to be able to sell products back. So I do worry that the construction industry is following a similar path with some of, not all of them, and this is definitely not saying every single SaaS service, we need to stop using, but we do need to be cautious about how much of our data we are giving away willingly.
Yeah. As an industry or as an individual company?
No, as an industry, very much so. And I actually think Leeds do a pretty good job of not doing that. And I think probably the bigger companies are better at that because they got these a lot more of the safeguards in place. It's more the medium-sized or the smaller companies they're probably not as concerned, and they're trying to get that competitive advantage anywhere they can. So they'll happily sign up to some terms and conditions and give data away for that kind of short-term gain. That's more of a worry. And when you actually look at the numbers, let's say surveyors, even though you've got the big companies, still the majority of chartered surveyors come from sort of small companies, SMEs or medium-sized companies rather than the big companies. So that's the bit we've got to be very, very wary of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, used industry-wide, not only within the organization, but used industry-wide, you would be able to, I'm guessing, mitigate some of the major risks that you see in the construction industry these days. I mean, there was that recent administration of that large construction company in England. Was it ISG? ISG, which for the layman looking in and having done just a quick bit of research, there's been a couple of construction companies over the years, and some of the reasons behind that I'm sure are a lot more nuanced than what I'm going to say. But one of the reasons that was reported was around that kind of challenge around cash flow management and having the accurate data, because of the way the payment terms operate in the industry, and the contractors often take on so much risk. So what's your view in terms of using data to try and mitigate those cash flow risks, or even sustainability risks or health and safety risks, or whatever it might be?
Yeah. Well, we actually covered this on the Project Flux newsletter recently, and we talked about the impact on the ISG because it shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be in the year 2024 and still having major corporations, major contractors effectively having to take a punt on a contract because they're not utilizing their data enough to know whether it's going to be successful or not. And because we operate, especially the contractors, in such low profit margins, it only takes a small smidge of an error in judgment to turn a profit-making job into a loss-making job, which can then have a huge impact on cash flow. Now, the fact that we're doing that in 2024 is just totally wrong. The data's there to know whether our project should be profitable or not, and particularly to work out what's happening with the cash flow. But because of the reasons that we've just talked about, the fragmentation of the industry, the low profit margins, the fact that we are still not utilizing data. So at the end of the day, a lot of contractors are taking a gut feel approach to contracts is just ridiculous. And this whole gut feel, there's a lot of bravado in the industry, I think, especially with the contractors who, you'll get somebody who's had 30, 40 years experience and they'll say, oh, I've done this for, my gut feel is very, very important. And they're reluctant to take the kind of data-driven approach because they somehow see it as an insult to their gut judgment. Now, what's interesting about that, there is a lot of studies in this that shows that even the most basic algorithm is better than our gut instinct. This isn't just construction. This is generally, us as human beings are just not as good as we think we are with gut instinct. And the comparison I like to look at is the football industry. So I'm a big football fan. I won't tell you your support because it will make me upset. But that whole industry has now changed as well to become incredibly data-driven. There's not one Premier League club who don't have a data scientist approach. And the way that they look at players' recovery, the way that they look at transfers has totally changed. And that is having a huge impact on the quality of signings and knowing how players are going to recover. But it took a while. And I know even in my club, it took them only recently they kind of pivoted to a data-driven approach because they still had the old boys about who were saying, oh, I've been in this game long enough. I know my gut feels tough. But you've only got to look at their record with signings was absolutely appalling. So, there's a lot of similarities with construction because like construction, every single football game is unique. So there's this argument that we can't use data to help us. But actually, they are doing that in football now. So why can't we do that in construction? Just because every project's unique in that it's a different product each time, you can definitely still use data to reduce the downsides. As a good mentor of mine, Martin Pate, always says, reduce the downside and increase the upside. That's as simple as that. That's why I use data.
And I think, people say individual projects are unique, and for sure the end product is unique, but it's still made up of the same raw materials. Absolutely. And it's still made up of the same types of labor in the main. You might have some specialist contractors on there for different projects for sure, but whenever you take a bottom-up approach to it, which being data-driven is all about, it's the same components time after time. So why wouldn't you be able to apply a risk model of a project or a set of projects that have gone really well or really wrong in the industry, and then compare it against your own set of estimates and plans to give you at least a risk weighting as to whether or not you have enough contingency put aside, or, even applying an AI. I often think of an AI as the third eye. It doesn't replace the human, but it gives you an extra sense. It's like
it's another member of the team.
It's another member of the team. Yeah. That kind of highlights that there could be a risk there that you're missing. And I think as well, I love your kind of, when you talked about like an industry-wide approach, because I suppose another thing that you hear in the news about the construction industry, particularly government projects, are they're always delayed or they're always overrun.
Yeah.
And I'm
not
sure,
a great image, is it?
Well, no. I mean, I think people take it for granted for sure, and having, we have a small subset of construction clients, and having worked in that environment over the last year, I have a lot more appreciation for the construction industry than I ever did before. But if I put my layman hat on, I would say, those projects are always overrun. Why is that the case? But if you did have an industry-wide database where you could benchmark some of those bigger projects, or even if government put one in place, I'm sure that the industry could operate more effective, more efficiently.
Yeah, and there is stuff going on in that regard. So, I mean, for many years we had something called the BCIS, which was the Building Cost Information Service, but that's now been commercialized. Still a very good offering, but it's no longer a kind of public service as such. It's a subscription model. But the IPA, which is the Infrastructure Projects Authority, they're developing a benchmarking service in terms of all kinds of government projects. So there's a guy called Suresh Parekh who's leading that. So that's quite exciting. So there is things going on, but it's hard to get off the ground because a lot of, number one, because of time, because you're asking people to do another thing, but also because people think there's some kind of inherent value in the data that they have and that they shouldn't be giving it away. But, you've only got to look at the banking industry with a kind of open banking protocol where it can be extremely done in an extremely well way so that everyone benefits. The banking industry now, that it benefits from the fact that they're all sharing their data. The other one, which is not quite as joined up, but it still is insurance. So when you get your car insurance, right, and you swap a provider, there's a database. They all know if you can't lie. And I'm sure, I've forgotten to claim an accident once or twice when I put down my insurance, and sure enough, I get a message to say, you've forgotten this, actually, your premium was going to go up. And I think, I forgot, I genuinely forgot about that. But they know because they're sharing a global database within the industry to the benefit of all. They can all make sure they're giving people the right premium. So I just say, why can't we do that in construction? It's not giving away the inherent data, just making sure we're all going to be able to deliver projects better. And then hopefully with AI, the thing that I see as the big opportunity we have to change the image of the industry from something which is very low profit and fragmented to something that can start delivering. Because if we can just leverage some of that efficiency that we can gain from utilizing artificial intelligence, then the profit margins go up. The profit margins go up, the investment in innovation goes up, and then you end up in this innovative circle where things get better and better. And at last, the industry can start really delivering some of the promises that it should have, because we've got some incredibly talented people in the industry. It's just the profit margins. Everything comes down to that. There's not enough going around, swishing around to invest in doing things better.
Well, maybe there needs to be a call for, like an outside investment moving in to help the industry as a whole. Like you see in the manufacturing sector, you see a lot of inward investment from government to increase the productivity and effectiveness and reduce the carbon emissions within manufacturing. Perhaps something else needs to be done similar in the construction sector.
And I like what the manufacturing industry does with the partnership with academia. There's a lot, there's very, very solid foundations from working with academia. So I think we can learn a lot from that too.
Absolutely. Or even there's an opportunity perhaps for one of those big SaaS providers, one of those big data analytics providers to come in and lead the way from an industry perspective and almost provide that data as a service and liaise with, all the big main contractors, the various subcontractors to start to build together that database of information and then potentially sell that back out to individuals. I suppose this isn't a problem of technology. It's a problem of organization and individual organizational demands, I'd say, or controls.
Yeah, there it is.
What other big innovations do you see happening in your sector? Like, I get the real sense within construction that above everything, you've health and safety, you've ESG underneath it, and then you've kind of project margins. So like those health and safety and the environmental concerns, social impact seem to be very high on every construction owner's agendas. Any innovations in that space that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's health and safety's got to come above all else. We've got to do better at reducing the amount of accidents on site. And that's where I think technology, the thing I'm most excited about is the use of robotics. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, for instance, we shouldn't look at it in the silo. It's artificial intelligence in combination with other technologies. So I don't know if you've seen some of the robots that are coming out where they've got almost a full degree of freedom of the human wrist, powered by artificial intelligence technology. I can see a future in not too long where a lot of the real kind of manual work going on site and the stuff that's the least safe stuff can be done by robots. That's not replacing jobs. You still need someone to monitor and sort of control the robots and, make sure it's doing what it's doing. But we're taking human beings out of harm's way. So I think that's something we're going to be seeing more of. And I think the construction side of maybe even 5 years' time is going to look very, very different to what it is now. Even walking around sites now is quite different. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen these little drones going around, sort of monitoring things. You wouldn't have seen people walking around with 3D cameras on their hard hats. That's becoming commonplace. So it's starting to change. But I think we're going to see proper humanoid robots starting to make their way into construction sites. Kind of whether it's 5 years or 10 years is irrelevant. That's bound to happen. And I see that as a good thing. And then in terms of the whole, that then feeds nicely with the whole carbon. So the problem with the ESG and the carbon side of things is that a lot of it comes out of wastage within construction. There's so much wastage. A lot of materials are having to be, there's tasks that are having to be redone. There's a lot of activities that take a lot longer than they should. And that all feeds into that carbon emission calculation. So if we can utilize data to reduce the program, to reduce the amount of errors on site, automatically that has a positive impact on the carbon. When you combine that with some of the new kind of technologies that are coming out, so carbon reduced concrete, things like that, then we can start having quite big effects. But that's the kind of embodied carbon within the bills. Then you've got the kind of the whole life carbon as well. What happens when you actually use the building? And that's the bit we've got less control over, because when we hand over the building, that building then is then going for another 30 years. And if we haven't set the parameters properly and it's just burning gas or whatever, then that's going to have a negative impact or start offsetting against some of the gains you would have made in the embodied carbon. So you've got to look at it in the whole life, not just what's happened on site.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that piece of in-life management and the maintenance and support, and also the handover of that maintenance support package, whether it goes from the person that built the building through to, like someone like a CBRE who's then going to manage the building moving forward, to someone who might purchase the building and manage it as a tenant, is pretty critical. And I suppose as well, also maybe getting a bit too technical now, you'd almost want a common data interchange for, as part of the legal sale of the building or the change of hands and who's going to maintain it. Here's our in-life package and you have to take over, and you have that almost like a passport, a digital passport.
Well, that's where the promise of BIM comes in, and on our podcast, we actually interviewed a few people on this. There's a lady called Professor Sarah Davidson, who's an expert in BIM and information management. But, the promise of BIM is always that you hand over a full digital twin with all of that in there, so that the service and the usage of the building is monitored as well. Now, the problem has been that even though BIM has been around for about a decade, it's only as good as the data that goes in it. This is where I get quite excited about artificial intelligence, because when you combine the kind of models with artificial intelligence that can maybe fill in some of the white spaces or make the assumptions that's needed, then all of a sudden you have a full operating BIM model that you can then hand over to the operator, who can use it for, maintenance and running of the building, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I think even with that technology, we're going to see a real step up over the next few years.
That's really interesting, because I only ever thought BIM was part of the design and construction phase. I had no real concept that it could be used within, maintain phase.
Sadly, I think you're probably right. A lot of people use the BIM model and it doesn't get used going forward. But that, to me, is a lost opportunity, Because if you've got a proper BIM model that then reflects the building that is then part of a digital twin, then in effect, you've got something that you can, and now we start talking about IoTs and monitors, the sensors and everything else in the building. All of a sudden, you've got a true digital twin of that environment that you can then use throughout the life of the building. That's the great promise. We're not there yet, but the technology's there. It's just bringing it together somehow.
Would you think about how much more efficient that would be from a maintenance perspective, where you have all the deployment of all your M&E right there in the BIM model. You'll have the operating instructions, the maintenance instructions, the parts manuals. If you have a fault, in essence, that BIM model or whatever is connecting to that BIM model could put out the part information, make the order for you, tell the engineer when they arrive up exactly what's wrong, where to pick up the parts in the
Exactly.
maintenance shed. That is because we would work with a lot of SCADA and telecommunications maintenance engineers that are having to, for every call out, go through reams and reams of paper to try and understand what the unit's doing, how to repair it, what to disconnect, what to reconnect. I'm thinking in particular of some of our critical national infrastructure in the UK and Ireland, actually, and how arcane the records are for that.
Well, think of the car. A good comparison is modern cars are just a wonder, and it tells me everything. It's got full kind of digital replica of what's going on in it. It's alerting me even when your tire pressures are down. Every kind of thing has got sensors in it. But there's no reason why that same kind of experience shouldn't be out of the building. I know it's more fragmented, but going with the advancement of technology and with the advancement of AI, there's no reason why we can't get to that place.
And I suppose, some people might be thinking some of the things we're talking about are prohibitively expensive, but the technology's here today, right? IoT's here. The buildings are all decked out with sensors anyway. In the main, it's just a fact of getting that sensor information back into the overall BIM model so that you have that consolidated one source of the truth.
Yeah. And these prices go down all the time. Take sensors, but they can be as little as 15 quid a sensor now. So it's not a huge amount, and you don't have to go all in. You can experiment with parts, and that's what we were talking about earlier. It doesn't necessarily have to be an all-in kind of experience. You can do this in bits.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about the benefits of digital data insights, AI in the construction industry. Do you see any risks or any negative impacts of it being used?
Yeah, well, yes is the answer. Well, and you can't brush that under the carpet. But the only way you deal with that is by being aware of it and being honest with yourself that there are risks, particularly with artificial intelligence, simply because nobody really knows where that's going, including the people developing it, which is the biggest one of all. And that's and that is kind of a much bigger concern than just manufacturing or construction. That's we're looking at humanity there, but that's also not a reason to not do anything, because you've got to trust that the governments are going to do the right things in terms of regulation. And there is some good stuff going on there. We've got the EU Act, which has come out, and then we've got various acts coming out throughout the US, but it's not kind of joined together. So there are things happening in that regard. But the worst thing we could do is do nothing, because going back to my other point, if we do nothing, then there'll be somebody who does, and they'll step into the space to control it. So I think it's understanding the risks and then mitigating them as much as possible. Right, you would do with anything else. It's no different. And there are some really easy things you can do. And a lot of it is actually common sense, Mark, because yes, we're dealing with some extremely clever technology here, whether that's artificial intelligence or IoTs, whatever it is. Yes, it's smart, but it all comes down to using your professional judgment and not doing anything stupid like giving away your private data. Now, people have got their being about ChatGPT at the moment because that's the buzzword. But in some senses, it's no different from kind of searches that you do on Google, or when you use some of the SaaS providers that you talk about. You don't necessarily know where that data's going, where the data's located, what the data sovereignty is of that. So it's not necessarily a new problem, The consequences of it are obviously much, much bigger, but it's the same fundamentals, which is, like I say, nothing that this stuff does should take over your professional judgment. So there's a really good report done by the London Property Agency where they talked about a concept called bookending. And that kind of just made so much sense to me. It basically says, with AI or any other technology for that matter, always use the point of human at the beginning, i.e. feeding the brief, feeding information, let the algorithm then do its thing, and then human at the end to check it. And I think if you follow those principles, it's going to be very, very difficult to go wrong.
I like it, bookended. I've not heard about that before. And we've kind of been skirting around this throughout the podcast, but talk to me a little bit about the importance of data governance, data quality when it comes to enabling big buzzword AI. Like some people have, I find some people have jumped on the bandwagon and they want AI whenever their data is everywhere. It's in multiple systems, multiple spreadsheets. So what would be your guidance to any business that wanted to get on to the AI roller coaster in regards to sorting out their data?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say something. I'm going to totally contradict myself if that's okay. Because so my first point is you've got to start with the adage that rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you haven't got good data, then all these AI models are using the data. So you have to get your data in order. You are get that. Now, again, that doesn't have to be a big, huge expense. You can do that in bits. Like work out what's the old 80-20 rule. What is the data that's most important to your business? And you'll find that, 80% of the data you need is in 20% of the effort. So get that in order. And it is true. It is absolutely true that the better your data is, the better you'll be able to leverage a lot of these AI technologies, particularly the kind of AI that was around before these large language models that came out. It needed to be very structured in databases, SQL databases or other kind of databases. And you needed to have done all that data cleaning. So now I'm going to contradict myself slightly. So I'm not... The difference with the large language models is that whilst you need the data, you still do need a good data set to fine-tune them and make them better. It doesn't have to be as structured as it used to be. It can work pretty well with unstructured data. And that's an opportunity because all of a sudden you can get a part, let's say you've got a pile of data in a data swarm somewhere that you've just chucked somewhere. You can get that into a state that you can start fine-tuning some of these large language models quite quickly without going through the rigmarole of necessarily having to get it into finite order. Now, don't get me wrong, it's better. It is still better to have it all governed and all put into its correct structured place, but you can start experimenting.
I like it. James, where can people find out more about some of your work and some of your ideas and concepts if they want to follow up with you post this podcast?
Yeah, so as well as my role with Gleeds, I'm also the chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force, and as part of that, I started a newsletter and then that turned into a podcast as well called Project Flux. So I'll provide you with the links, Mark, and you can put it in the show notes so people can subscribe. So basically that came out of a point for me where I was saving loads and loads of links throughout the week because there was just so much going on. I was like, yeah, I'm going to read that later. And then it became my Sunday job, like whilst we're watching football, to read up about it. And then I just thought, you know what, I could turn this into a newsletter. So I did. And then we put that out there. We've now got nearly 3,000 subscribers. And it's just a weekly digest of everything that's happened in AI in terms of projects and productivity. And that's totally free. And then as part of that, we do a podcast. So similar to this, just talking to people in the AI space around. So we've had some fantastic guests. We've got professors from universities. We've got people in the industry. We've had people on from the institutions like the RICS, APM. And again, that's available on all groups podcast platforms. So feel free to subscribe and I'll give you the links to both of those.
Brilliant. James Garner, well, look, thank you very much for your time. What a really insightful discussion on the future of technology within the construction space, data, insights, and AI. Thank you very much, James.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to The Digital Manufacturer. We hope that today's conversation has provided some food for thought or sparked new ideas that will help you on your digital journey. To learn more about any of these topics discussed in the episode, head over to our website www.rubictech.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on your favourite podcast platform to help others join in the digital manufacturing movement. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future episode. The Digital Manufacturer is brought to you by Rubik, where we're not just talking about the future, we're making it happen. On behalf of everyone at Rubik, thank you for listening.